Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our City Council workshop for Monday, November 6th. We've got a couple of items on the agenda this morning. First, our ADAPT DSM report, and then a 2024 annual action plan with our CDBG and our home allocations. So, Scott, any quick thoughts before we get going here?
No, I'll go ahead and invite Jeremy up. And as he's preparing for the presentation, I want to give a shout out to thanks to all the staff that have been involved with this process. I don't want to steal any of the talking points from Jeremy, but there's been an incredible amount of work done, I think going on almost 2 years worth, that involves quite a few of the departments. There have been, for several years, even beyond the last two that we've been planning, efforts in several of our departments, Public Works and specifically with stormwater issues, and others with forestry. I could go on and on. But it's been individual and it's been in silos. And so what we knew we needed to have was a comprehensive plan. And because of that, we have initiated this ADAPT DSM planning model. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeremy, and thank you for all the work.
Council members, parents, program manager. I'm a little hoarse this morning, so bear with me as I work through this. But ADAPT DSM is really, it's more than just a plan. It's going to be an ongoing initiative lasting several decades with specific actions that are laid out over the course of that time period to help us meet Council's unanimous goals that were adopted in early 2021. And it's really one of the largest planning efforts we've undertaken as a city, and seeks to bring together, let's see here. Doesn't seem to want that there. There we go. Seeks to bring together a lot of the other planning efforts that we've done and unify those and embed sustainability and aspects of equity into all of those efforts as well. And so it's meant to really reinforce those. And it's a guide for decision-making, policy, program, and initiative development. And throughout this whole process, it's been a community-driven planning process, one that's been meant to empower and engage community members, make them feel like they have some ownership in this planning process. And we've worked very closely with our utility partners at Mid-American Energy, local businesses, community-based organizations, and the public to craft this plan. And it really brings together, like Scott mentioned, all of the successes we've achieved across our community. It unifies our purpose of various sustainability and climate-related initiatives we have, either ongoing or about to begin in our community. And it's really a plan for how we will face tomorrow, a decade from now, and well into the future. I want to start by talking about some of the benefits of implementing this plan. The EPA's social cost of carbon tool finds that based on the amount of emissions we've modeled and anticipate reducing through this plan, that we could see upwards of $55 million in benefits accrue to the community, potentially more, as the EPA is working to enhance that tool and make that tool more robust, so upwards of $155 million potentially. And this plan is really about maximizing not just environmental benefit, but economic benefits, health and welfare benefits, equity and justice, creativity, and innovation in our community. On the economic benefits side, one of the things that I think is important to point out is the potential for job creation in our community, and good paying, trades-related jobs, folks to install HVAC equipment, renewable energy systems, help with expanding electric vehicle infrastructure and other benefits in our community. And so it's something that we should keep in mind as we're working through this plan, looking to adopt this plan, is it's not just about the challenges we face, it's about the opportunities we face. On the health and welfare side, a significant reduction in pollution, which will increase the health of our community, decreasing incidences of asthma, cancer, heart disease. We can look at creating opportunities around justice, affordable housing in particular. A lot of the actions that are in a climate action plan help to make homes perform better, help to make homes more comfortable, help to reduce energy burdens for folks in our community. So there are some real benefits that we can see accrue to the housing in our community as well. And then on the creativity side, a lot of communities have attracted new businesses, new sectors to their communities by implementing climate action plans. One example is the battery belt that we're seeing emerge in the southeast, in the southwest, and a few spots of the Midwest where companies are coming and building factories and taking advantage of aligned climate action planning efforts by those local communities to enhance the production of electric vehicles and battery-related equipment. So just a reminder of our timeline here. As Scott mentioned, this has been a nearly 20-month process, started almost January of 2022, and really started out by building the right systems and components to really have active engagement in the plan, bringing our consultant, the Brendel Group, on board here to assist with the project. And then spring of 2022, we launched into community engagement, having a series of workshops, surveys, and other engagement activities that have progressed throughout the majority of this project. And now we're in the home stretch, looking to get this across the finish line so that we can take advantage of significant federal funding that's available through the Inflation Reduction Act, state funding through the Iowa Energy Office, and even private sector funding opportunities. On the community engagement side, as I mentioned, we've worked hard throughout this process to make sure it's reflective of the community's needs and what the community has been asking for, both historically through city surveys, where they've indicated seeing reductions in emissions and the implementation of more energy efficiency as key aspects of what they'd like to see the city do more of. But throughout this project, also engaging folks through a number of mediums, in-person events like an online workshop and in-person public forum at the Central Library. Over 430 survey responses received across 2 surveys. Significant uptick in visitations to the project website, and then engaging 67 community climate allies. What are community climate allies? Those are community-based organizations and the general public, people that have been interested in this process and wanted to participate in this process. So that number 67 actually reflects significantly more folks when you start to think about how many people some of these organizations serve or engage with on a daily basis. And also important to point out that we've had all throughout this process a steering committee made up of community leaders focused on sustainability, energy, and a number of the other topics and focus areas of this plan. And we made sure that we built a balanced steering committee that reflected the needs and opinions of the community. And then we had a technical advisory group that was made up of academia, subject matter experts from industry, business, and community-based organizations, environmental groups that have really helped strengthen this plan and help us hone in on which particular solutions and actions will be the most effective. And just to wrap up on community engagement, just a couple examples of some of the community engagement activities. I mentioned all of the in-house open houses and workshops, and we've done a number of tabling events over the last couple of years. You can see here a couple that we've done at the Botanical Garden, youth camps, summer camps, engagements with students from North High and the By Degrees Foundation, doing tours of different sustainability projects throughout the city, and getting their opinion, since they're the ones who are going to face the majority of risk that we'll see associated with climate change, and a slew of other events throughout the community. So that kind of catches you up to speed on the process, how we conducted our engagement throughout the course of the project. And now I'm going to turn it over to Shelby Summers, who's going to walk through the technical aspects of the plan.
Real quick, maybe what was the total engagement of residents that you've engaged with here?
For the surveys, we had about 400 survey responses, but we went to a number of public tabling events and visited neighborhood associations throughout the planning process. So the number is even higher when we start to factor in those numbers.
And Jeremy, real quick, did Mid-Am have a member on the steering committee?
Yes, yeah. Mid-Am was represented on the steering committee and has been an active participant, especially in the last several months as we've collected feedback to refine the plan and make sure that this plan is both balanced and ambitious.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Shelby Summer. I'm the Director of Planning at Brendel Group, and I served as the consulting team project manager. I also got to witness what Scott was saying was an amazing staff effort of city staff from nearly every department participating in the process alongside the technical advisory committee as well as the steering committee. So my role today is to talk through some of the kind of assembly of the plan and the different components as well as the technical underpinnings. So the plan has sort of this layered approach, and it's designed to really serve you for the next couple decades. So it begins with some high-level goals. I'll talk about the goals in a minute here. The goals are intended to provide the strategic direction, what you're hoping to achieve as a community for the next few decades. Under that, we have a layer of solutions. These are sort of the broad community aspirations, things that get folks both within city departments as well as community organizations kind of rowing in the same direction. These are the things that we want to achieve with this plan. And then more specifically, we have many, many actions, and you'll see there's a prioritized list of actions in the plan. The actions are specific initiatives. These can be programs, policies, projects. There are many, many different actions. Many are city-led, but many are also community-led. So I'll talk through all the specifics in a minute about some of the priority actions. But I wanted to highlight on the right side, we have a series of guiding principles. We really use these guiding principles to kind of check ourselves throughout this planning process to make sure we're upholding what we heard from the community as the most important things to elevate in this plan. So here we have the vision and the guiding principles. So you can see the vision is quite aspirational that the community will reduce our climate change risks and contributions through the advancement of a more just, resilient, and equitable future. So again, these guiding principles around economic benefits, health and welfare, equity and justice, and creativity and innovation, these were the things that we were looking for as we developed the solutions. How can we adjust this solution to be more creative? How can we adjust these solutions to really advance health and welfare? So you'll see these throughout the plan. You'll see how each of the solutions kind of contribute to each of these guiding principles. You'll also see quotes from community members throughout the plan in their words, what climate action means to them. So we have two sets of goals in the plan, and what I was really drawn to this project was really about this. It's the marrying of climate pollution reduction and climate adaptation and resilience. So The City Council already has adopted unanimously climate pollution reduction goals. These are very ambitious. They are really necessary in order to address your share of climate change contributions. That alone, we know, in this world is not necessarily enough. There's a lot of climate impacts already happening, and so looking at ways to do both, reduce emissions as well as adapt and be resilient, are really the crux of this plan. So starting with the climate resilience and adaptation goals, you can see there is a series of kind of mileposts along the way. We have 4 goals in 2030. The first is looking at the forecasted impacts of climate change. These include extreme temperatures, precipitation and flooding, severe storms, water scarcity. We want to make sure that with every action, with every solution, we're looking at the climate risks and vulnerabilities and doing our part to reduce vulnerability of Des Moines community members. Next, we want to make sure that everyone has access to what's called a resilience hub. These are places people can go when there's a climate hazard or emergency. These are places that can serve not just in these acute events, but long-term for community members to really access support services. Next, we have maintaining plans for municipal facilities to make sure that city government's leading the way and that your city facilities are really fortified and ready to withstand climate impacts. Then the last 2030 goal is really around sort of reaping some of the positive pieces of climate change. And, people are moving around the state, around the country. And so can Des Moines position itself as a community to attract some of those folks that are moving from the hot parts of our country and places that might not have such a great climate. Then looking out to 2045, the city already has adopted a tree canopy goal in the Urban Forest Master Plan. So this plan sort of adopts that goal into this one. Then the other side of that Venn diagram are the climate pollution reduction goals. And so you can see there's a series of time-bound goals starting in 2025, a 28% reduction. You're very much on track to achieve this. Looking out to 2030, that's a 45% reduction on your emissions from 2010 levels. Then all the way out to 2050, which is net zero greenhouse gas emissions. I'll pause and point out that the 2035 goal around 100% clean electricity, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is a transformative goal. It is an enabling goal. When you achieve that, that will make the 2050 goal possible, but it is a critical step. Then at the bottom of this slide, you can see the science-based targets, and this is a philosophy that communities need to be kind of owning their fair share. And so in addition to tracking progress against these adopted goals, the plan recommends monitoring progress towards these science-based targets just to see how you're tracking.
In 2035, electricity citywide, that's, just want to clarify, no natural gas anywhere? Is that
Nope.
part of that, or is that not it?
No,
Okay,
this is just the electricity portion.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of a different goal.
Might want to clarify that
Yeah.
in this slide. Electricity citywide, but does that just mean electricity citywide or no natural gas, or that was my question?
Yeah, the 2035 is specific to the electricity sector. So it's part of your entire emissions portfolio, but it's just the electricity piece. It's not comprehensive, including your natural gas. The natural gas is picked up in 2050.
Would it help if that
So I
was
don't
electricity
understand that.
generation?
Yeah.
Is that what
Something
we're talking about here?
Yeah.
And what about coal?
Coal comes into the electricity mix.
You what?
Coal is a way that you generate electricity. So by getting to 100% clean electricity, that is, essentially no coal.
No coal.
So that goal, the 24/7 goal, is a combination of utility supplied energy resources and local generation resources. Think about rooftop solar and geothermal, where people may be using it also. So we may see in the near term, over the next decade, continued use of natural gas and maybe some other fossil fuels, but there's the component of carbon capture and storage and whether we can take advantage of that to reduce emissions from those. But really, that goal, when you're thinking about it and how it ties back to all of our emissions target, we want to drive as much renewable generation as possible. And really, this whole plan on the emissions reduction side is designed around efficiency first. The cheapest energy is the energy you don't use. So over the near term, we really want to focus on boosting efficiency in our community so we can reduce demand, which means we need to get less energy to the community to meet that demand. So there's a better chance for us to focus on expanding renewables, taking advantage of more renewables on the energy supply side, but then also locally to meet any gaps that remain where there may still be some fossil fuel generation in the mix.
Where are we at right now with our energy that we're using? What percentage?
In terms community-wide, we still need community-wide from the utility side. Mid-American has their Green Advantage program where they retire credits annually on behalf of the city and other customers. And so I think they hit 100% on that last year. I think we'll have to reach out to Mid-American to get the specific number, but I think their overall portfolio mix is approaching 50% for renewables. Relative to the other generation resources that they have in their portfolio. Community-wide, we haven't taken a full stock of all of the private and public installed solar and other renewable sources. That'll be something we do as we start to map out how we get to that 24/7 goal.
I'm confused. You said 100% one time, then you said 50%
So
another time.
there's a nuance of those are credits that are retired on behalf of Iowa customers on an annual basis. This goal is 24/7, so that's every hour of every day. So we have to think of a different way that we start accounting for that and tracking that. We need a little bit more nuanced data resources and data tracking to make sure that the gaps that we're seeing on a daily basis, that we're figuring out how we fill in those gaps as well.
Yeah, I've got a couple follow-up questions. Because you said Mid-American has an energy advantage. Does Mid-American track the Green Advantage? Sorry. Does Mid-American track the Green Advantage hourly by their credits currently?
Not that I know of. I think that's an annual.
And do you know how many coal plants Mid-American's still running when they hit 100% under their Green Advantage?
So I know Mid-American's committed to closing their coal plants by 2050.
Right. How many do they currently have in operation?
I think 6.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're in the business of telling Mid-America, our primary energy company, how to do their business. That's what this plan is telling us to do.
No, this plan puts forward the partnership and cooperation where we can to work with Mid-American to achieve these goals. And so I think we've worked hard to build that relationship and figure out where those partnerships and opportunities will be over the next several years. We have the side agreement that we signed that was part of the franchise agreement renewals. And so we've been partnering there to identify projects in the community. And this plan kind of rolls into that. And some of the priorities will focus on there. But then there will continue to be a gap in fossil fuels generation versus clean energy generation. And part of the commitment to this 24/7 goal is figuring out what that gap is and how we help to finish that, fill that as a city, whether that's investments in utility scale, clean energy resources by partnering with Mid-American or other opportunities that we can take advantage of too.
Okay, so back to the structure of the plan. You can see there are 7 different focus areas. These are just the high-level chapters. These are, again, a mix of emissions reduction and climate adaptation and resilience topics. And then within each of these, we have a series of 2 or more solutions. So as Jeremy was just mentioning, you can see in the energy supply and distribution focus area, for example, there's a mix of distributed renewable energy. These are the rooftop or the parking garage solar arrays, plus a significant contribution from the utility scale clean energy that's already being supplied by Mid-American Energy and has plans to increase pretty significantly. And then same thing on the waste and food and climate preparedness side, a number of different solutions. I'll highlight here that the analysis completed was at the solution level. So you will see these kind of alphanumeric codes on the next few slides. And so those kind of codes go back to these different solutions. So in the modeling efforts, we took a wide look at the different pathways to achieve these goals, and we analyzed a couple different scenarios. We had great input from our steering committee as well as Mid-American Energy and working through some of the technical analysis and assumptions. Ultimately, the plan recommends this first scenario, which focuses on community reinvestment. As Jeremy mentioned, it's really focused near term on energy efficiency and reducing the amount of energy consumed. Over time, that picks up the utility scale clean energy and shifts to decarbonizing over time. But in the near term, it's really about efficiency, fuel reduction, removing barriers for people to access these other technologies. So this is just a snapshot in time of this recommended scenario. So this is looking at 2030. The bar on the far left shows the forecasted emissions if nothing else happened. And then you can see the contribution of the different solutions and how they result in that remaining chunk at the end of 2030. So you can see the biggest portion of the emissions reductions in this 2030 snapshot is coming from B1, which is that building efficiency and comfort. Sure.
Looks like it shows a slight increase in emission. Am I reading that wrong?
Yeah, I'll have to look at the technical assumptions on that. There is kind of an interesting mix here where you have, as the community is growing, you do need more supply. And so it's probably just a matter of kind of the play between efficiency and renewables happening.
But everything is geared just to Des Moines,
Yes,
none of the metro area.
correct.
B2 is building decarbon. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd just welcome clarification on that technical piece.
When
Yeah.
he pulls up the 2050.
Yeah, we have a kind of scenario happening where, again, we're emphasizing efficiency first, so that does mean natural gas systems are still at play. And so as the community grows, you will see a slight increase from that. The efficiency kind of negates that. Looking out to 2050, again, if you achieve the 2035 goal of 100% clean electricity, then that's where the force multiplier as you start to decarbonize some of the systems related to transportation and buildings comes into play. So that's where the B2 really starts to become important once you have that clean electricity supply in place.
And just to provide a little more clarification for your question, so the gap between 2030 and 2050, so as we round the corner into the 2030s is when we really start to put a lot more emphasis into that building decarbonization to stack on top of the energy efficiency work we'll be focusing on over the next 3 to 5 years. And so really turning up that dial. And so, it's not just 2050 when you'll see that decarbonization impact. A lot of that's going to happen over the next decade as we work to take advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act, investment opportunities to help support decarbonization and other potential resources and technical assistance that are out there also. So between 2030 and 2050 is
A specific example of why you might see that bump up. You've had some industrial processes that they're not going to be able to switch to an electric system in the next 6 years. And so those may still increase while at the same time you're balancing out with some of the other pieces. To 2030, beyond 2030, that's again where Jeremy said things start to transform.
Quick question about
Yes.
the comparison on those decades, if you could go back. So by 2050, is that taking what's accomplished by 2030 and adding another 20 years? Or
Yes.
in each, just for example, on T3, increased transit access and ridership, it goes from -8 to -6. So I'm just trying to get my head around this.
The forecast number, so where you start, like if you look
Oh,
at
and
the far
an
left,
additional 6%. Got it.
we'll look at the two forecasts. In 2030, the amount of emissions are in the 2,225, and in the starting line for the 2050 number is 1467. So that reflects, it's actually a little higher than the 2030 total at the end, which had 1305. I assume that reflects some sort of growth number.
All right, but so we're not charting big changes in transit use.
It's interesting. In the transit world, they are pretty significant in the overall scheme of the entire community's emissions. It is a very small portion.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
So you said something that you said the transition between now and 2030 with electric. What does that mean? I don't understand what you said just a couple minutes ago.
So
What
in
are we
terms
we're
of,
transitioning from what? Like from natural gas to electricity, or what is it? That's what the focus is trying to transfer that to only electricity.
that transition, or sometimes you'll hear the word decarbonization, this plan really emphasizes that decarbonization happening kind of at a small scale, voluntary. Folks, if you're replacing your heating system, want to try a different type of alternative? Sure, some people might choose to do that based on some of the federal incentives available. Okay. This plan really emphasizes those transitions happening after 2030 and really 2035. Once that electricity that supplies those systems is that 100% clean electricity. Okay. So it is definitely a critical part of achieving the 2050 goals in the next 5-6 years. There's a lot of changing technology. We recommend that the city's role is removing barriers. So making sure that contractors are trained, making sure equipment's available, piloting things with municipal facilities to see what works, what doesn't, before requiring other folks to do that.
But ultimately, we are trying to eliminate the whole natural gas portion of it to homes and to businesses.
Yes, and that is what a net zero goal is.
Just
yes.
in general, we are trying to eliminate natural gas to homes and businesses, is what this plan is saying.
Yes, and that's consistent with the goal adopted by 2050.
And that's consistent with Mid-American's net zero goal by 2050
I
as
understand.
well.
I just want, since we only talk to less than 1% of our residents through your whole community outreach, maybe now's the time that they realize that that's the goals and initiative that we're trying to, I guess, take with this plan.
Yeah.
And today might be a good day for them to know that.
I have one question.
Sure.
You talk about going to electric, and I go back and I look at who was involved in this plan. And missing from that are the people that pay the bills. The Home Builders Association, developers, builders. And Scott, I know that I sat in this council chambers several years ago, and we were told, oh, you're going to include all of these people that have a real stake in it. I see a whole lot of nonprofits on here that aren't involved. It's not going to cost them anything. But missing from it are the stakeholders, the people that really have something at stake here. I don't see a heating and cooling contractor. I don't see HBA. I don't see the people that are that are actually spending the money on any of these lists. And I find that very interesting, and we were promised that you were going to bring in a group of builders, and we would all come together, and that is missing from here. And I don't understand why Mid-Am isn't up here presenting. They're our energy supplier. Why aren't we working more closely with them? Because I don't think they're going to agree with a lot of this.
I did mention earlier, we have been working very closely with Mid-Am, especially, when we presented the initial draft to you all back in July, and then working with Mid-Am as part of both our stakeholder group, but then in additional conversations to find where those opportunities for partnership are.
Well, I would
They've been
hope,
very cooperative in coming to the table and working with us and figuring out what will work for them and what will work for us in this transition. And so I think we're in a good spot with support from Mid-American, and that will continue to improve as we work through the challenges of and the opportunities of implementing this plan. Because there are also federal regulations that will be coming down the pipeline, no pun intended there, towards Des Moines and towards industry, manufacturers of equipment, home builders, developers. Technologies are changing. New federal standards on equipment in homes and in commercial buildings will be updated over time. And a lot of that is trending toward electrification, to be honest. And that's something that we can expect to happen over time. In order to achieve any of the goals that the international community has set, the nation has set, you all have set, there has to be an aspect of decarbonization and a shift away from fossil fuel resources. The grid has historically become cleaner and added more renewables more quickly over time than individual buildings alone and homeowners and commercial buildings. And so there'll be a dual focus on what we can do at the utility scale as well as what we can do for our residents, for our businesses, simplifying and helping the process for home builders, for developers. The homeowners, the people that live in these houses, are the ones who will have to incur the greatest amount of cost over time, not just the builders and developers that are building them.
and that's what
upfront.
concerns me.
And the intent of this is to reduce that energy burden, and it also improves the comfort, looking at envelope improvements, better insulation, better windows. All of those things help to reduce energy costs for homeowners and reduce that energy burden. There may be an initial, especially in the near term, an initial slightly higher upfront cost to invest in an air source heat pump. That's not always the case, but that can have long-term savings effects for the people that occupy those buildings, and it can make those buildings safer.
And I understand that, but what I'm hearing this morning is we have the potential to save this, we have the potential to do this. And this was a huge, huge document to get through. I can't imagine that anybody's actually read every word of it. But what concerns me is I don't see any cost. How much is it going to cost our taxpayers right here in the city of Des Moines to move forward with all of these that you're talking about? And I don't understand why we're not doing just little bites at a time. Let's
Because
approach.
incremental change will not get to the goals that you've established as council. And so in order to meet those, we need to make a concerted investment in this effort. And, the memo that we've provided to council lays out some of the near-term costs. We can't forecast out to 2050 and tell you what this entire plan is going to cost. It's made up of hundreds of projects and initiatives and different things that will happen over time. So we've looked at what potential near-term costs might be, but a lot of this will be borne out as we start to implement this plan, working with our departments through budgeting processes and other efforts to align the plan with what they are already doing. A lot of our departments are doing a lot of this work already and investing in these things already. And so this plan is really meant to bolster those, support those, and amplify that effort.
But
Connie?
what's the
Well,
cost?
excuse me, Connie's got her hand up here.
I was just well, this appendix E that we got, outlines, looks like there's a ton of opportunity to get money,
Yes.
that if we pass this plan, then we have the opportunity to go after these funds. Is that what?
We have essentially draft applications
Right,
that are
ready to
sitting
go.
on the table waiting
Ready
for
to
this
go.
plan, because this plan is necessary
Right.
in order, as like backup documentation in order to apply for some of
Yeah,
those.
so there's a lot of money that's coming down the pipeline that we could apply towards. So like if we apply, so are there programs for individual homeowners that we could say if we could give to them, like the ION program, could we add heating systems to the ION program instead of just the
Right.
envelope?
Right. We
Because I
could.
know people, it's great that we put the outside, but if their furnace is no good. So those are the kind of things you'll be applying for once we pass this.
Right, and,
Okay.
as Shelby mentioned, reducing barriers for people to participate in those, so it'll be a
Okay.
component of applying for funds directly that we can pass through to those folks, working with our, especially for the low to moderate income community,
Right.
working with our
That's what-
local housing agencies and nonprofits to figure out how we support their programming, and reducing those barriers.
So has any of the money from the federal, all the initiatives that are coming down, has money flowed yet? I guess what I'm saying.
Well, we
Have
have
seen-
the
Not
million.
for us, but for other cities, have they been able to get these
Yes,
funds?
other cities have applied for other funds and are implementing projects
That's
as
why
a
I was just
result of
curious.
that. And then we have the $1 million that came to our MSA for the climate pollution reduction grant, where Polk County will be leading that effort, but it's really a team effort across the metro, where multiple counties, multiple cities will be working together to develop a plan similar to this at a regional scale, and that'll be happening over the next couple of years. But there's an additional $4.9 billion of federal funding that's
Okay.
available to implement projects that come out of this plan, projects that come out of that plan.
But we need to approve a plan to go for
Right.
the money. Okay, I just want to make sure the steps, because we were talking
So
about the
to
funding.
Connie's point, so whatever grants we get, they're going directly to homeowners, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, some of them will go to homeowners, some of them will go to support
Businesses.
commercial properties, some of them will go towards larger scale investments in renewables or utility projects in partnership. There are some that are available that we could potentially apply for with Mid-American or,
How many millions is that?
so it's
Billions.
multiple, yeah, it's
Yeah, I just
billions.
wondered, I didn't.
It's billions, so just the implementation funds for that one grant I mentioned is $4.9 billion, but there are billions of other dollars in other program buckets across the Department of Energy, across the EPA, across the Federal Highway Administration, and
So
other
one
agencies.
grant is $4.9 billion that we're going to apply for, is that what you're saying?
So
No,
that'll
we
be-
don't get it all, we get a piece of it. That's
get a
what the
piece.
money that's available in it.
But in order to even get a chance at any of that money, we have to have this plan in place.
Okay.
I want to just talk a little bit about the technology piece of this, and that maybe helps folks understand some of the projections, because these areas are pretty dynamic, right? And one of the things that we've seen, particularly when there are incentives for clean energy technologies, that creates incentives, like you were talking about, for new businesses and folks to innovate in that space, which in turn drives down the cost over time. So the cost for implementing some of these pieces today, we would expect, the cost to put an air source heat pump in a home today is going to be one thing. And there's a very good chance, given the incentives and everything that's out there to innovate in that space, 10 years from now, the cost to put in an air source heat pump is going to be a fraction of what it is today. And that's the piece that we can't fully anticipate how quickly or how significant that cost curve changes, but we know the technology, we know these things are changing. We've seen it happen in other areas. For example, the cost of solar technology 10 years ago was significantly more than it is today. And in fact, if you looked at projections 10 years ago compared to where we're at today, the cost of solar came down a lot quicker than people were anticipating 10 years ago. And so if similar things happen with storage, with efficiency technologies, the cost of this could be less than what we're anticipating. It could be easier to implement. And that's part of what the importance of action today is about. It's about encouraging that market. It's about providing those incentives for people to innovate so that we get to that next step. And that's maybe why you don't see all of the costs and can't project all of the costs right here today.
And there's significant avoided costs that we can anticipate occurring from this plan too. So investments that we make in some of the resilience and adaptation actions in this plan, think about raising the levees a couple feet to protect us more from flooding, all of the stormwater projects that are happening in our community. Those are examples of adaptation projects. So it's investments in projects like that too.
Are there not Department of Energy dollars now or other tax credits that an individual who's going to do an energy
So the
efficient...
Inflation Reduction Act increased tax credits. They were actually...
Well, but as a homeowner, as Linda was pointing out, the expenses, even though it's going to cost me to put in the air exchange heat pump or whatever, I get
30%.
A tax credit.
Yeah, so it's 30% now with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. It was 26% and was kind of dropping off. That's for solar in particular, and was going to drop down to 20% and potentially even lower. But now with the Inflation Reduction Act, it's not just solar. It's air source heat pumps. It's heat pump water heaters. It's geothermal systems. It's a number of technologies that you can stack and layer and take advantage of to improve the performance of your property. And that's just direct to the taxpayer. And some of these, actually, they're revamping the way that they're going to be delivering these. So some of these will be at point of sale or upfront next year. So it won't be something where people have to wait till the end of the year. So that's going to help low to moderate income homeowners invest in these through things like the Energy Advantage program that we've worked to develop with NFC and making sure that these technologies and equipment roll out to homes sooner and more affordably.
So and Scott, this is probably a question for you. And I understand about the grants, and I think that, but when you look at 4.7 billion, I mean, nationwide, if we don't qualify, because I would think that this would be an uphill battle of getting lots of different grants as we go through this. What's our plan to implement this if we don't get some of these grants?
So understand that this plan at its basis is the science to achieve the goals the council's already set, right? And part of that is the mitigation that was discussed, the stormwater and others. And then the other aspect is reducing our own emissions. And so your question about what do we do if we don't get grants actually depends on which actionable item we're talking about.
Let's talk about natural gas a little bit, because I think that's probably the one that's probably the most concerning to our residents. So
it may be the most concerning,
right
but
now,
it's not the most immediate. I really want to push that. We're looking right at it here. This implies incremental changes between now and 2030. The real change on the natural gas needs to occur between the 2030 and the 2050 range. Okay? For a lot of reasons. We've heard that we know that by that point, the electricity sources are going to be even more clean, thanks to Mid-American Energy's efforts. Okay, so each one of these actionable items is going to have a budget discussion of their own. Whether there be grant applications and matches that we need to put local funds into, or if we need to look at, in the case of natural gas, possibly changing our abatement program to incentivize home building, and that would address either new construction or major renovations. There is a budget discussion that we will have with ION, which is rehabbing existing homes where the homeowners are struggling to make improvements to their homes. You're going to hear from me recommendations with grant opportunities and potentially higher sales tax utilization for that program. And so each one of these actionable items is going to have their own budget discussion through the processes.
So you're suggesting using sales tax money to implement this plan?
There will likely be, yes, a request for sales tax for pieces of this plan.
Okay.
The specifics on ION will be likely more immediate, but any discussion about natural gas conversion, decarbonization, is not likely between now and 2035.
Scott and council, why don't we try to move on
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
get this thing completed, and then I'm sure have some more questions.
Sorry.
Thanks. This is my last slide. This is going back to, we saw the 2030, 2050 snapshots. This is what it looks like over time, that emissions shifting that's happening. So the dark black line at the top is showing the forecasted emissions. The last inventory for the city was completed in 2019. So everything after 2019 is a forecast. And then the different colored kind of wedges show what's happening with these different solutions as they come into play. You can look at 2035 as sort of an area where there's a lot happening. So the sort of longer dotted line shows the city's adopted goals. This shorter dotted line is showing that science-based target that we're tracking against. So again, it's an interplay and timing kind of scenario. This is a recommended pathway. We know that no community will follow an emissions reduction pathway perfectly. That underscores the importance of monitoring, adapting, pivoting, and making informed decisions as you implement the different possibilities. That's why we have different scenarios in the plan to see, oh, hey, this year we're actually tracking closer to a different scenario. So this is a dynamic planning tool used to help you kind of understand where you're heading based on your progress each year. So with that, I'll pass back to Jeremy.
So I'll jump in and talk a little bit more about implementation of the plan. Once this plan is adopted, a lot of the actions are sort of grouped together around a lot of the community engagement feedback and emerging themes that came out of that process. And so you can see, one is providing climate action leadership and coordination that speaks to helping make access to some of these opportunities more practical for folks in the community, providing education and outreach around some of those aspects. And that gets into the second catalyst of this plan, building community capacity. Climate action and climate change are topics that not everyone in our community is familiar with or needs to engage with on a daily basis in their lives, although it impacts them in their daily lives, or maybe they don't have the time to do so. So part of that is building some of that knowledge base, building some of that continued support for implementing the plan. And leading by example is the third catalyst, really. What can we do in our municipal facilities to provide a leadership role? Who can we partner with? What other communities are focusing on this? We're starting to see movement across the metro in Johnston and West Des Moines and other communities that are looking at adding positions similar to mine to take advantage of some of these federal funding opportunities and to develop plans similar to this. And then leverage and maximizing resources and capital for climate action. So there are dozens of different funding scenarios that we could pursue to make this plan possible over time. Scott spoke to a few. There are others out there that communities have utilized. Oberlin, for instance, uses the sale of some of their high-value solar renewable energy credits to then purchase lower cost wind credits and uses the offset amount between those to invest in projects in their community. So there's creative strategies like that we can leverage, but really focusing on maximizing all of these opportunities to kickstart and implement this plan. So we talked through a number of actions that are in the plan, and I wanted to touch base on the 35 priority actions that we'll focus on between now and 2035. So we have over 107 specific actions in this plan. We've created a prioritized list of 35 actions that are our target actions. The reason these are our target actions in the near term, they have the highest opportunity to spread a myriad of benefits out across the community. They will enable future work on other actions, make other actions possible as we move into the 2030s, 2040s. They expand on existing efforts, investments we're already making in the community, and amplify those. Our forestry programming and our stormwater management and our LEED facilities, LEED certified facilities are an example of some of the work we're already doing. And then there are opportunities to leverage potential partnerships and funding sources to accelerate some of these. So I think we talked through a number of examples as we moved through the presentation here, but I'll touch on, some of the ones maybe we haven't talked about. So related to adaptation and preparedness in our community, continuing to coordinate and focus on enhancing local food systems is one of the actions in here. Bringing back the food security task force, turning up the dial on our Feed DSM initiatives, looking at ways that we can support and expand urban agriculture in our community. We get questions about that often, and I think a lot of you as leadership do too. So that's supported in this plan. And Shelby mentioned, monitoring and sharing climate data. You can't fix what you can't measure, right? Is a pretty common adage. So that's something we'll be focusing on in this plan too, is really strengthening our ability to collect data, track data, know where we're going on this pathway to zero emissions. On the engagement and capacity building side, we've already started conversations with some of the different housing services agencies in the communities, figuring out where we can align our effort to make sure that the investments we're making in those properties are supporting this plan, are supporting the city's goals also. Continuing to invest in stormwater management solutions like our homeowner rebate program, looking at continuing to promote and drive urban infill and redevelopment in our community. So taking advantage of existing parcels throughout the city, looking at ways that we can support transit-oriented design that help us make those investments in our transportation system. On the continuous improvement at city facility side, so looking at opportunities, especially as we start to see equipment reach the end of its life in our facilities. Are there alternatives to that we can replace and take advantage of? Now, city governments can take advantage of the tax credits. It's called direct pay. So you basically get that 30% off the top from the federal government to invest in some of these technologies. So where can we do that as some of our equipment ages out? Expanding the tree canopy and supporting expansion of that in our communities will help significantly reduce heat islands. It'll provide shade, especially in a lot of low to moderate income communities that don't have as much tree cover across the community. And then looking at where we can install additional renewable energy systems and resources in our portfolio to expand access to clean energy.
Go back here to a T-1A, Plan for Walkable and Transit Supportive Neighborhoods. What are your ideas on that? How would you achieve that?
Yeah, so that's working with our partners at DART and working with our engineering team to support efforts that they already have underway. We have, as you've all talked about, often significant sidewalk gaps in areas of our city. So,
But aren't they doing that now?
they're doing that, but this plan is meant it's in this plan to further bolster that and support that and make sure that that gets implemented and tie that back to the benefit that it has in reducing emissions across the community and better connecting people to where they need to go, whether that's work or school or our park system.
So you're saying this plan aligns with other priorities that we've already identified?
Yes. There we go. Now, our game plan for engagement. There's a significant amount of work to do over the next couple of years, in particular, to ramp up implementation of this plan. This plan is a community-wide plan. It's not one that myself and Madeline, our sustainability specialist, can implement on our own. It's going to take collaboration and support and work with other departments across the city, community-based organizations, the partnership, our utilities, and community members as a whole. Like, we want the community to be a part of this, right? So continued engagement at different events, providing direct education and trainings for the community and potential partners in implementing this plan. Conducting some additional community workshops around specific actions or a collection of specific actions that are related to figure out how we can implement those more efficiently and effectively. And continuing to focus on a number of different ways that we can engage the community there. We'll be bringing back the city's green team, which existed, about 5 years ago or so. That kind of phased out for a while, but we'll be bringing that back so that we have that conduit between departments, so we know what different departments are working on. They can bring ideas, challenges up to leadership, and there's a pathway back down to support that and build more strength in implementing this plan and more cooperation across our organization. And then looking at creating a formal community climate allies committee that'll be made up of community members, businesses, nonprofits, others, hopefully folks from the development community, to help us implement this plan over time. And then we've created a number of tools that you have in the resources that we've provided that include community climate action guides that are targeted towards homeowners, businesses, and community-based organizations. We've created a standard slide deck, and we want to do some train the trainers, where some of the big partners that we need in implementing this plan can learn how to go out and talk about and promote this plan more in the community. And then, of course, what's not on this slide is continuously monitoring our progress on this plan and providing updates to council through an annual report. We're actually working on utilizing some potential tools to do real-time online dashboard that will allow the community to track progress on implementation of this plan, and we'll have more details about that later this month or next month.
Jeremy?
Yeah.
So right now you're a department of 2, right?
Right.
So there's a lot here. How's this going to work?
That's.
I mean, you can only spread the peanut butter so thin.
Yeah,
here,
right. So that gets into this near final slide here. So looking at coordination across other city departments and other city staff. There are city staff who are already doing work that's related to the implementation of this plan, so it's making sure that their priorities and the things that they're doing tie back to this plan, and they can help with implementation of it. There is additional investment that we'll need to look at in terms of measurement of work needs for this project, and looking at do we need to make investments in coordination, measurement, compliance that help us further support implementation of this plan? You know, a lot of that will get borne out as we start to dig into the specific actions. Obviously, I appreciate any support that we can get to help us with implementation of this plan, but we've created a pretty robust roadmap to take advantage of existing staff in the near term to get this off the ground. My goal is that this plan will bring in enough money that we can make further investments in this project and in the implementation of this plan that will continue to support staffing and other resource needs that we have to implement the plan. So, you know, looking at budget alignment as well through our capital improvement operating budgets. Also, we have an equity lens that a lot of projects and efforts need to go through during the budgeting process. So looking at that as a potential pathway to make sure that, you know, the work we're planning as a city aligns with this plan also. And I think I'll just jump on to...
I would just add
Yeah.
real quick that some of these grant opportunities also have an opportunity to receive funds
They
from
do.
staff as well.
Yep.
And so, but the staff may not reside at the city. The staff may reside with the community, the collaboration we have with Polk County and the other counties. It may actually reside with a nonprofit. The key here is that we're going to need a lot of collaborations to make this plan work.
I just have one final question. So you talked about Polk County. That's a question I have. Has this plan has any other community in this area been involved, has seen the plan? Because I know sometimes, you know, it's great that we do it, but this is a bigger issue than
Yeah.
just Des Moines.
So we presented on this plan last week to the Des Moines Sustainability Task Force, and we had folks from Johnston, Clive, Waukee, West Des Moines that were all on that call listening in, not staff, but folks who were involved with similar organizations. We've had outreach directly from staff and city leadership in those other communities about, like, what are you focusing on in yours? We recently worked with Des Moines Waterworks to provide some insight and best practices for climate action planning. And so there's a lot happening out there. You know, we're not the first community in Iowa to consider and to hopefully adopt a climate action plan. Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, Dubuque, several of the larger cities, and Ames is the most recent one. They just adopted their plan and are adding staff to support that plan. So we're seeing more movement and more momentum, and a lot of that ties back to the federal funding that's available, and that's a decade's worth of funding currently that communities can take advantage of. So some of it is available, you know, one time, some of it's available annually, so it's kind of also prioritizing and thinking about which of those opportunities make the most sense for our community, because we won't be able to apply to everything, right?
Yeah, I was just curious because sometimes we need to let them know what we're doing so that
Yep.
if they wanted to join on.
And we're happy to, as we start to implement this plan, have conversations with other communities, because the more momentum we can build in implementing this plan and their efforts, the easier it'll be for all of us, because it's really, this is an international effort, and it's going to take hard work from everyone to achieve the goals that we're all trying to achieve.
I might just add in, Jeremy, thank you for all your work. Lest anyone forgets, you know, we've, as a city, have been working on climate issues for nearly 2 decades now. And we were one of the first STAR communities. There were 7 communities in this country that started out, and the STAR communities was to make a climate plan, to make actions, be able to measure it, and be able to adjust and work with our staff. We then got, and I remember Larry Hulse and I were working, there was another planning grant that was available from the federal government that we could have gotten, but we committed it to a regional plan, which we called the Tomorrow Plan, And we worked with the MPO. Rather than just build a highway, and then try to figure out how to develop around it, we thought we ought to look at our whole region. Where do people work? Where do people live? What are the direct communications and contacts, and how do they get to and from? How do we look regionally at where we should build, why we should build, how we should build? And then, once we decided that, then start looking at the highways and how we do it, and in the meantime, maybe just improve the ones that we have. Polk County has now picked that up, and it got separated from the MPO, and so they're going to be doing, hopefully, a more regional plan. But as was pointed out, this is, we have a very specific plan that really moves on with very specific detail, and those 35 immediate initiatives that we're going to be working on that we hope can begin to make a difference and show leadership. That Des Moines, we're not just talking about it, we're not just going to put codes in place, we're going to do it. Look at some of our buildings, look at how we look at improvements to our existing buildings, look at how we build new buildings, looking at the greenhouse and the animal control facility that's out there. I mean, we've got a huge solar array out there that's going to be, we hope, nearly net zero there. We want to lead by example, and that has worked. Look at Wellmark, look at the World Food Prize, look at some of the other buildings that some of the private sector people have done, and that really picked up on everything that we were trying to do here and said, hey, maybe we can do it better.
Yeah.
And but we can't just sit back, because what are there, 945 cities, towns, hamlets in this state, plus 99 counties. We can have to show what we're doing along with these other cities in Iowa and, quite frankly, around this country. There are those, I guess say specifically, I've spent a lot of time working and talking to cities around the world and looking at their circumstances, all of which are different. Des Moines' circumstances are not the same as even Los Angeles or Miami or Philadelphia. I mean, we've all got circumstances, and we all have to learn how to deal with them, but we can learn from some of the initiatives that others have taken. But it's, as we talk about education, which is one of the big issues, everybody has to understand what the risk is here. Not just for us in the next 3 to 5 to 2050. It's, quite frankly, the future of livability of this planet. And we have to look at it, and we know that the young people, boy, they pick it up quick. They understand exactly. I've been to high schools. You worked with the North High students. I've been to a couple other high schools where they have environmental groups that are talking about what can we do, how should we do it, where are we going, what are we going to do. They care and they learn quickly. We need to have all of our society understand what the risks are of not doing the work and making our community adaptable and showing the rest of the world that, hey, this can work. We can save our citizens money in the long run, and with certain programs that are available today, even give them assistance to move forward on these things immediately. There's a much bigger local government involvement, because it's, as I say, it's not just citizens and businesses, it's communities, it's states, it's countries, it's the world that has to understand this. And we all have to be able to work together to achieve success. And success will be that we stop, we hope, climate change, and we can adapt to some of the unfortunate circumstances that are already existing around the world. But we have to look at what we eat, where it's possible to raise food. We're going to do that locally here and look at sustainable food sources right here in our own city and use that as yet another example. But we have to all understand we're all in this together. And we all have to start today. So Jeremy, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing, because the detail that we have in this plan, we know it's dynamic. We know that there are certain aspects of it that may need to change. There may be new technology that comes forward. There may be different risks that present themselves, and we have to continually understand and be aware of what those circumstances are, but all of us working together are going to make the solution.
Thank you.
Mr. Manager, you want to move forward on...
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize the second bullet point here is that we can bring this back on the 20th if council is comfortable at that point. But we need to know if you have follow-up questions, thoughts on the plan, if it needs to be delayed to the December 4th. But I would say just communicate with us on what your thoughts are, additional audiences we need to speak with. Thank you for your time.
I would just ask Scott, he says he has a lot of grants that ready to be put in.
Yes.
What is the match, and where does those dollars come from?
Sure.
For the grants that Jeremy already has filled out?
So again,
Thanks, Jeremy, for all the work you and limited staff has done. There's a lot of information here, so we
Yeah.
appreciate it.
the immediate
Yes.
opportunity.
We have actually the carbon fueling and infrastructure electric vehicle charging grant that's actually out there awaiting award right now. That announcement will come in early December, and that'll fund the installation of electric vehicle chargers in disadvantaged communities. That's the purpose of that grant. So that'll be all of the library, well, depending on how many are awarded, that would be all of the community centers and all of the libraries. The match for various grants varies depending upon the grant, but some of them have 80-20 matches, 80 federal, 20 community. Some of them have no match requirement and actually provide. One of the unique things about the Inflation Reduction Act and a lot of the funding sources that are in there, it's the first time that the federal government said, we know that it's going to cost you money to implement these, that you're going to need resources and staff to do that. And a lot of these grant opportunities provide funding to bolster that. And we haven't really seen that as much in the past. So some of these are 100% grants. Some of these are 80-20. I haven't seen anything else other than that. We do have a direct voucher that we'll be receiving under the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. And we have to submit this plan as part of the application for that as sort of a prerequisite.
I would also add that, and oftentimes, if there is a local match requirement, we may already be investing in that area for which we can use that as the in-kind match, especially when it comes to forestry, sidewalks, things of that nature, where we're already spending.
So my question is, once, if we approve this, whether the 20th or the 4th, and then you said you had a stack of grants ready to go out, I don't know what's in the budget for this fiscal year to match those. So that's a question that I'm posing.
So those are,
what is it?
those are grant applications that will need to go in January through April and beyond of next year. The awards for those will be next fall or possibly into early 2025.
Well, you guys can answer the question,
Yeah.
because you still haven't answered. So you can answer the question later to all of us if you don't know the
Yeah, I think the
answer.
easiest answer is when we apply, we can let you know that, for instance, this next batch doesn't have a match requirement. But as they do have match requirements, I'm not about to approve those myself. I'm going to ask for council approval for any local matches in advance, if that gives you comfort. Absolutely.
He just said he had a stack of grants ready to go out if this was approved. I just wondered if you guys had a dollar amount for the match for those stack.
There are no match for those
So you
grants
don't-
that we
so-
have that we're working on applications for
Okay.
right now.
There-
Yeah.
That's
Sorry.
great. That's
Yeah.
a great answer. I mean, that's what I asked.
Yeah.
And if ever there is, you'll know in advance of the
Absolutely.
application.
Yeah.
And how many grants are you ready to submit if this is approved?
There are 3 grants that were,
And none of them are matched.
none of them are matched.
Perfect.
Yeah.
and
the
may have
total,
staff.
and the total is how much for the grants?
So we've got probably, I'd have to go back and get you a specific
Yeah,
number.
why don't you send
So,
us, I mean, I think all
yeah.
of us would probably be interested in seeing what we're looking at getting.
Yeah, yeah. I think the memo that we provided for you might show some of the near-term and potential funding tied to those, but we'll get a more specific number for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate your work.
Yep.
Mayor and council, again, I appreciate your time with this report. Just as a reminder, as a takeaway, that this now is we have the understanding of the science behind what it would take to achieve the goals council has already voted on and approved unanimously. So
But we don't have the cost.
right. And you
don't have
won't
the
ever
cost.
have the full cost. And so we have to bring to you, again, each actionable item as to whether we got other funding or whether we need to continue what we're doing or add to that. So again, this is a roadmap, if you will, of the different discussions, the different actionable items that need to be addressed over the next 20, 25 years.
This essentially puts a plan in place to achieve the goal that every single one of us previously voted for.
Now you know the science.
Yep. So the alternative, if we don't have a plan to achieve the goals that we've all voted for, would be to change the goal. So if you're not supportive of this plan, what's your alternative?
All right, Scott, let's move ahead.
All right. I asked that Lisa come this morning because there were some questions about our CDBG funding on an annual basis, and I thought it would be helpful to remind council of what those buckets of funding are and how we allocate those. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Lisa Krabs. I am the Federal Funds Administrator with the Neighborhood Services Department. And so, like Scott said, I'm just here to kind of update you on an item that's on the agenda tonight. It's the 2024 Action Plan, but then specifically as it relates to our CDBG and home allocations. So, quick overview of what we're going to cover. Purpose of the presentation, consolidated planning, the federal resources that we're talking about, and the goals and activities that those federal resources address. So the purpose of the presentation, just a kind of a reminder of how the overall process works. It's easy to get lost, and there's a lot of processes we have to document, paperwork going on in the background, so just kind of giving you a high-level view of what that looks like. Review the goals and regularly funded activities with the CDBG and home funds, and then sprinkled throughout is a preview of some upcoming actions, so you're not hopefully surprised when they show up on your agendas. So the purpose of the presentation, to go over the CDBG and home allocations and what we're doing with those. CDBG is Community Development Block Grant. It was a funding source authorized by the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. So we've been receiving this funding for many years. And it's really to develop viable urban communities through housing, suitable living environments, and expanding economic opportunities. And really the key thing here is principally for low and moderate income persons. There's a lot of eligible activities, as the name suggests, community development. So there's a whole span of things that we can fund, again, as long as the priority is serving low and moderate income persons. So some of the things that you'll see in here, infrastructure. We don't really do a lot of economic development projects currently, but we have in the past. Public facilities, housing, that's the biggest one we fund with our Community Development Block Grant. Public services, and some other things. Code enforcement is another one. The Home Investment Partnerships Program, or the HOME program, is appropriately named. It's an affordable housing program. So that's its only focus. And with that, it was authorized under the National Affordable Housing Act of 1990. So again, a funding source that we've been receiving for several years. And we can do new construction, rehabilitation, we can do acquisition, rental, or homeownership are all authorized.
Lisa, in dollar amount, what is low to moderate? Low to moderate.
Sure. Yeah.
Like a family of or?
Yeah, right now I think for like maybe a family of 4, it's probably going to be anywhere from 60 to 70,000. I'd have to check.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just good for people that are watching at home that
Definitely.
know what we're talking about.
Yeah, the relative information of what that means is important, and I can get you a chart too if that's helpful. I think on our action items we try to include in the blue letters kind of a
Yeah.
yeah. So the planning process. Whenever we talk about CDBG and home funds, we also talk about the consolidated plan. So if you see these terms, they're usually packaged together. They're interrelated, right? The consolidated planning process is really the strategy that we go through to get to a point of seeing how we're going to use those funds. So again, they're all packaged together, interrelated, but every 5 years we have to do a big consolidated plan. And that includes, the needs assessment, market analysis, and community input. That's what all goes into that plan. And so with that, once we approve a 5-year plan, then we have these 1-year action plans that update that 5-year plan. So right now I have it circled. We're in the 2024 action plan of this current 5-year cycle. And then with each program year, we also have a report that's due to HUD. So we tell them what we're going to do, what we're going to spend the money on, and then we have to tell them if we did it. So. Now, what's being shown here is that at minimum 4 times a year, you'll see something on the council agenda related to the consolidated plan or these funding sources. So, like I mentioned, once every 5 years, you'll see the consolidated plan update. Every year, every fall, you'll see the annual action plan updates. And I have a little asterisk there because technically we're required to have it done 45 days before our program year, which is January 1st. So every November 15th, we need to have our plan ready. But what happens is that we have to wait for our allocation from Congress, and HUD tells us not to submit our plan until we get that. So what happens is usually you'll also see a reiteration of the same plan in the spring. And which is actually pretty convenient because then we know what program funds we can filter back into other programs that were unspent from prior years. So it works out actually pretty well. But so don't get confused when you're like, I thought we just approved this, because you probably did. And then again, as I mentioned, we do a report every spring. And by regulation, we have to have that in 90 days after our program year ends. So that's first quarter. And then any amendments to plans and agreements. And so this is where tonight we have a set hearing for a couple amendments. And so that's just because when we ever have a major change in scope, location, who will benefit, budget, the significant budget changes, then we trigger an amendment. And so that has a public hearing process. And so you'll see a couple of those come up. And then any agreements over $100,000, and that's in alignment with the city's ordinance about what the city manager can approve. So typically when you see those agreements come in, any of our projects where we partner with Home Inc., those are exceed 100,000. Rental rehab projects, you'll see some of those. Housing development, we have Carter Circle on the agenda tonight. That would kind of support that. Yeah. And so coming up, our next consolidated planning process, our next 5-year plan, starts here in 2025. And so in 2024, we'll do all the planning for that. And so you might see some things or might be asked to participate and give your opinions on those. But and that's planned for 2024 to start, of which we'll try and approve by November 2024 for the next cycle. You can tell they're different slides because they changed the color, so even though they look the same. So how much, go ahead.
Both for CDBG and home?
Yes, and actually it's also for ESG. So I'm just not talking about ESG because homelessness is kind of, a big issue. But yeah, if you look at this slide, it shows our formula grants are CDBG, home, and ESG through the consolidated plan.
Okay, so it's one overarching plan for all
Yes.
of them.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the last 4 years, it is what we've received. We hover about 3.7 to 3.8 million for CDBG each year. We have around 1 million to 1.1 million for home, and then about 325,000 plus or minus for ESG. So I talked a lot about the planning, right? That's what we covered in that first section. Now we'll get to the implementation. What are we actually funding with these activities? So here's the high-level goals, and the goals are affordable housing, economic opportunity and development, of which I mentioned before, we don't really have any activities that fall under that currently. Public services, infrastructure, and public facilities, and homelessness. And again, I mentioned that we're not covering homelessness in this presentation. These goals are set by HUD, so we didn't outline these. We just align with what HUD has already told us are kind of the priorities. And I highlighted, the biggest thing of all this is we have to make sure that we're serving low and moderate income residents. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can do it through income verification of a beneficiary or someone who lives in a house that's being supported with CDBG funds. You can do it by area basis. So if parks, for example, serve a low mod area, we can do it by the census tract. And you can do it by presuming the clientele. So some of the services, if it supports homeless persons, that's a presumed category that they're going to be low income and benefiting. So
I just ask, within the total, then, do we have to set to a certain percentage? Is that a guideline, or is it up to us to decide within our own plan?
A little bit. So I'll skip ahead a little bit.
Sorry, if you're going to go
No,
on,
it's
we
okay.
can talk
It's
about
okay.
it later.
There are certain categories where maybe it's not. There are certain categories where there's caps.
Okay.
So public services, for example, is 15%. We can't exceed 15% of our CDBG budget towards public services. You probably saw in the COVID funding, there was a waiver for that. So those were all public services, but typically that's not okay for HUD. And then administration, we have a cap of 20%. I'm trying to think. I think those are primarily the caps. There's another percentage. We have to ensure at least 70% of the projects we do benefit low mod income persons. So if you have like mixed income projects, that's where we have to do some calculations. So our first goal, again, implementing the planning process that we talked about, is affordable housing. And this is where we spend the majority of our time and money, is implementing this goal. So some of the categories that you'll see, or some of the projects that you see fall in this one, are rental rehab. An example, you recently approved the Klein building, which is just north of Chuck's on 6th Avenue. We did a preliminary commitment for the town hall, or the old North Des Moines City Hall, which is that second picture down below. And so looking to fully award that when all of the details have been ironed out. Evergreen Trail was a home-funded project from last year that we'll see realized in probably 2024. And that was under CHI. Owner-occupied rehab, so we do a sliver of the ION program. We partner with them, I think, pretty well. And so we'll do less than 10% of their projects with our funding, but we help them reach, I think, some of the more difficult monsters of projects, I would say, that need everything. For each project?
No, just in general, what are we given to ION out of
Yep.
the CDBG?
Well, I think last year it ended up being, we reallocated a lot, and there was about $2 million set aside from them, just from a lot of unspent funds in the years past. This year, it's about $700,000 that we're allocating. Another one you'll see, home buyer assistance and single unit new construction. So we package those together. And those are really our Home Inc. and Habitat for Humanity projects, the single unit ones. And so anytime we give funding to those entities, their clients also get a little bit of down payment assistance or home buyer assistance with it. And then just general support for affordable housing development. That can be a lot of things. One of the things that's on the agenda, as I mentioned, was the Carter Circle infrastructure project, and that goes to support housing in the future. Another one we're kind of looking at is maybe some acquisition projects where, large parcels of land can be redeveloped by maybe a combination of public and private developers And so we can put funding in to support what that means. And then also code enforcement actually falls under affordable housing as well.
In the right category, but what's the program for, like, if we have a low-income person and their furnace goes out in the middle of the winter?
Right.
Is that covered by any of this, or is that a completely different program? Or is it even available?
Well, as the city, it's not really directly available. We do partner, ION partners with a lot of other agencies in the community. And so I think Polk County Weatherization can do that. I think the Impact can actually do some of that through their LIHEAP assistance. Okay. So there's 2 or 3 owner-occupied groups that I know of that do it. And so when we have something come up, my understanding is that ION will consult with them and say, hey, can you help out? Okay. Yep. So in the public services category, this is where we have that 15% cap. We typically have funded nonprofit operations. Impact has been a pretty solid one through the last few years, and conservatively assist about 20,000 Des Moines residents each year with their funding. In the past, we have also assisted CIS with some of their operations. And so the final goal I believe I have listed on here is infrastructure and public facilities. In the last few years, we've worked with parks, and they're a great partner here in the city. So in 2020, helped fund the Drake Park Shelter. 2021 was Cohen Park. 2022 is Evergreen. And then looking to do Birdland Sports Courts, and then Jordan Park in 2024. So that's really all I have for you. Any questions?
I just have a quick comment. Thank you for all this update so everybody understands what home and CDBG and ESG and all that is. I have to remind all of us that, you know, we at the city level, we work in a very nonpartisan way. And these funds, we don't ask whether people are the red party or the blue party or the green party or whatever. When they have needs, we try to meet the needs of everybody. Mm-hmm. And I have to remember a number of years ago, Tom Latham, a Republican congressman who represented our district, was in charge of the committee that looks at this funding, CDBG and home funds and whatever. They were threatening to cut them and, quite frankly, do away totally with home funds. And we invited Congressman Latham to Des Moines, which he gladly came, and we took him around and showed him where that home fund money was going, where CDBG was going, got him to meet a number of the people that were in there, and he was very taken by it. And I remember that as they were arguing on the floor in Congress, he gave me a call one day from the floor and said, "Thank you for the tour, Mayor. We just saved home funds."
Great.
So that's all of us working together that makes that happen. Our work at this level is nonpartisan. We have to stay there. We have to work together because we serve the whole community. And we have to continue doing so. And thank you for this update. And people know that we are putting these funds to good use. Thank you.
Right.
Mr. Manager, anything? All right, I believe, do we have a early? No. All right, we'll see everybody about 4:45 then. I think we've got one little proclamation to do, and so we will see everybody. This meeting's adjourned.